Hello and thank you for accessing this recording. My name is Elena Bennett and I'm the Provider Development Officer for the Digital T-Levels at NCFE. In this bite-sized recording we're going to explore the Chief Examiner's reports for the Digital Support Services Occupational Specialist assignments from the Summer 24 series. There were 3 occupational specialist assignments available for the 2024 Digital Support Services T-Level. We will explore each of these in turn, highlighting some key areas of strength, some areas for development, and suggested strategies for how to address these within your classroom. So firstly, we'll start with the Occupational Specialism Digital Support. Firstly, here is a reminder of the Digital Support OS performance outcomes. These are covered over the 3 assignments that form the Digital Support OS. This slide shows some key overall findings for the Digital Support OS. So we can see that in terms of the areas of strength, overall students did well in this OS. Most of the tasks in the 3 assignments were attempted by students, although for some students a significant portion of a task was not attempted. All 3 assignments showed a range of achievements, including some very good responses from select groups of students or providers. And technical language was generally good, as was spelling, punctuation and grammar. In assignment 1, overall students performed better in task 1, with task 2 having elements where students omitted to attempt part of the tasks. So the task 1A strengths, overall a good understanding and knowledge of business control techniques and GDRA or DPA within the workplace was demonstrated. Students generally performed well with this task, providing detailed recommendations on business control techniques and references to the principles of GDRA and DPA. A small number of students failed to mention any of the 7 principles, resulting in much lower marks. And the task 1B strengths, this task was performed well, including good health and safety risk assessments with appropriate actions to control risks. Generally good evidence of planning, timescales, inventory and network design in setting up a network was demonstrated. A large proportion of students achieved well, band 3 and 4 marks, when producing a security risk assessment and identifying mitigations. So moving on to task 2. In task 2A, many students provided sufficient evidence of installing a Windows server and an Active Directory, achieving 2 or 3 marks for this section. However, evidence of creating Active Directory could have been more detailed and well explained. There was good evidence of setting up user accounts and groups. And then in task 2B, most steps required in this section were achieved by most students. Most students achieved full marks for installing application software, and most students were able to provide evidence of installing necessary drivers and configuring a mobile device alongside. In task 2C, most students performed well in this task, demonstrating good knowledge and sufficient installation notes. Installation notes were generally detailed and identified most key vulnerabilities to the system or network with good recommendations. And generally there was a good use of SPAG. Now moving on to assignment 2. Overall, students performed well with this assignment, however there were some tasks which were omitted. In task 1A, most students logged and prioritised all requests and justified their reasons for prioritising jobs. In task 1B, students attempted all 3 job requests and many achieved full marks for some of the job requests. In task 2, evidence of the instructional document was often very good with some detailed points and explanations. Technical language was good and mostly appropriate with only minor SPAG errors. And now assignment 3. Overall, students performed well with this assignment. In task 1, many students provided a good detailed set of maintenance notes covering all installations. Infrastructure logs were sufficient and the testing was generally detailed. Penetration test remediation log was generally completed well with only minor omissions or errors. Future planning was generally in depth and considered the penetration test. And in task 2, students achieved top marks for creating an image and uploading it to a distribution system. So now we'll look at the areas for development for the Digital Support OS. So in assignment 1, improvements could be made to the health and safety risk assessment in terms of including a full range of methods such as policies and standard operating procedures, lone working, manual handling, safe lifting, working at height, fire safety and reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrence regulations. Some students only mentioned a couple of these points. Most students did not show any evidence of implementing a physical or virtual network. As with the Summer 2023 series, this part was often missed by students. There was very limited evidence of managing software licenses. Most steps required in this section were achieved by most students. However, many tasks within the section were not attempted. A lack of detailed evidence of operating system installation limited marks in this section. Most students achieved marks for installing application software. Most students did not show evidence of implementing suitable backup security controls, but were able to provide evidence of installing necessary drivers and configuring a mobile device alongside. And now we'll move on to the areas for development for assignment 2. Common trends with missing evidence were evident. Fault 1498, students often lost the mark for set a password or PIN number and alternative method by failing to set up the alternative method. Fault 1499, many students failed the first part of this task for ensuring automatic updates are on. Fault 1579, some lost marks for the installation of a VPN. Many students failed to submit evidence of screen share videos or missed out parts of the task. Screen share videos, where submitted, often fail to include all requirements. To improve, students could have included audio to explain their steps and submitted individual video files for each area, i.e. 3 video files in this case. And finally, for assignment 3, some students did not show evidence of all 7 vulnerabilities, which often lost them marks. Some proposed mitigation for vulnerabilities was either missing or vague. And many students did not show evidence of logging into the client and testing network connectivity or checking image quality and ensuring applications functioned as expected. This was similar to the Summer 2023 series. So in response to the main areas for development for the Digital Support OS, the following strategies could benefit students in preparing for their OS assessments. Mini training sessions. Develop focused bite-sized training sessions that cover essential topics like health and safety policies, manual handling, fire safety, RIDDOR, display screens and backup security. Even better if students could develop mini bite-sized videos or presentations to share with each other. Interactive workshops. Conduct hands-on workshops and activities to simulate workplace environments. Use real-world scenarios and case studies to illustrate the importance of these topics in the workplace. For example, allowing students to identify and manage risks actively. Project-based learning. Assign group projects, for example, requiring students to design a physical or virtual network, detailing their implementation plans and software license management. Encourage collaboration where students can share ideas and solutions for common challenges. Case studies. Use case studies to illustrate real-world scenarios and problems, for example, the consequence of neglecting testing and vulnerabilities. Facilitate group discussions on potential solutions to identified vulnerabilities, fostering a collaborative learning environment. Encourage students to think critically about their approach and decisions. Step-by-step guides. Provide step-by-step guides for specific topics, for example, OS installations, emphasizing the importance of documenting each step thoroughly. Develop clear structured instructions on tasks such as setting up passwords, enabling automatic updates, and installing VPNs with visuals to aid understanding. Use screencast videos to demonstrate these processes step by step. Again, encourage students to create these step-by-step guides for each other. Checklists or rubrics. Provide checklists for students to become accustomed to, including all necessary evidence such as audio commentary and clear visuals. Create a rubric outlining expectations for each submission to clarify assessment criteria. Use with students in mock scenarios for practice leading up to the exams. Feedback and reflection. After completing tasks, provide detailed feedback and encourage students to reflect on their performance, focusing on areas for improvement. Incorporate self-assessment and peer assessment to promote accountability and critical thinking. For example, organise peer review sessions where students present their screen share videos, receiving feedback on content and quality. Encourage them to provide commentary on their processes, emphasising the importance of audio explanations. So now we move on to the digital infrastructure occupational specialism. We'll start with a reminder of the digital infrastructure OS performance outcomes. These are covered over the 3 assignments that form the digital infrastructure OS. So firstly, here are some key overall findings for the digital infrastructure OS. Overall, students performed exceptionally well on tasks 1 and 3. Some excellent Gantt charts were submitted for assignment 1. Results for task 2 were varied and a wide range of questions were asked that students were unable to respond to. The majority of providers provided adequate proof to support the workbooks they provided. However, some submissions did not include links to the workbooks, making it challenging to assign points in accordance with the mark scheme. And now breaking down the areas of strength by assignment. Overall, there was good achievement for assignment 1. In task 1, most students submitted excellent Gantt charts. Most students covered at least one countermeasure to each threat identified. Some students identified multiple counter threats which supported a higher band of marking. And in task 2, there was good achievement overall. Task 3, many students performed well in this task as well. And moving on to assignment 2, again overall students performed very well in task 1, however there was a high range of responses and marks for task 2. So in task 1, a very high success rate on this task with many students achieving full marks, but in task 2 there was a high proportion of missed marks on this task. And overall, assignment 3 saw the highest marks awarded. Most students showed excellent technical understanding, but evidence in actions relating to the scenario and critical thinking could be improved. It's recommended that providers focus training on more physical aspects of business recovery and critical thinking around students' recommendations against the tasks. So in task 1, overall students achieved well. On task 2, again, generally students achieved very highly on this task. Higher marked plans included legislations as well as written communications around certain company policies. In task 3, marks were generally dropped due to students not covering or not knowing the physical measures of disaster recovery and business continuity. And in task 4, achievement was varied, but generally compared highly against other tasks within the assignments. And now we look at the areas for development arising from the digital infrastructure occupational specialism. So assignment 1, some students only provided a written overview of the project, which impacted their marks overall. For the annotated floor plan, higher marks were awarded to those students who produced a key to identify their annotations and applied attention to detail. Some students neglected this element of the task, which impacted their overall marks. Ensure students focus on the scenario rather than just sharing technical understanding. Many marks were lost overall where students failed to provide adequate critical thinking when producing evidence of their research. And some students lost marks by failing to provide screenshots of where they had gathered evidence from, along with the written evaluation of their sources. In assignment 2, students need more training on time management and exposure to user groups and access control, as excessive time spent on task 1 affected task 2 performance. Providers should not overemphasize task 1. A minimum of 4 photos is required for full marks, but marks were missed due to incomplete tasks. For example, missing or unverifiable evidence and lack of user group documentation. This could have been due to time constraints or technical difficulty. And finally, assignment 3. Insufficient evidence of physical and technical risks and their link to data loss reduced scores for some students. Many floor plans lacked careful risk management consideration. Policies were often highlighted without linking them to legislation, and some students didn't relate tasks to the scenario, and this affected their document writing. Higher marks were awarded for over 10 actions, but missing explanation and relevance to the scenario reduced scores. So from the areas of development arising, some suggested teaching strategies to improve performance in the digital infrastructure OS are as follows. Assignment 1, detailed project guidance. Provide students with a clear rubric that outlines the expectations for project overviews, including the need for detailed floor plans and key annotations. Scenario-based learning. So emphasize scenario-based exercises to help students understand the importance of applying their technical knowledge to real-world situations. Critical thinking workshops. Implement workshops focused on critical thinking and research skills, guiding students on how to support their designs with solid evidence and reasoning. And screenshot tutorials. Conduct tutorials on taking effective screenshots and documenting sources to enhance evidence gathering. And for assignment 2, time management training. Using past or sample OS assessments could help students allocate their time effectively across assignments. Focus on small chunks of assessments at a time to hone in on specific issues rather than potentially overwhelming students with full mocks. Feedback loops could provide opportunities for structured feedback to ensure students are on track and that they then also respond to this feedback to improve their work. Using shadow assessment questions can be useful to provide evidence of students' progress. User group simulations. Create simulated user group discussions or scenarios to expose students to user access control and its importance. And documentation essentials. So teach students the significance of complete documentation, including the requirement for at least 4 photos, and practice producing examples of this. And then for assignment 3, risk management education. Integrate lessons on identifying and mitigating physical and technical risks, linking these concepts to relevant real-world scenarios. Policy and legislation linking. Encourage students to connect policies with relevant legislation through guided discussions or case studies. Action analysis. Encourage students to explain their actions and decisions thoroughly, perhaps through peer review sessions where they can critique each other's explanations for clarity and relevance. And now we move on to the network cabling occupational specialism. Again, we'll start with a reminder of the network cabling OS performance outcomes. These are covered over the 3 assignments that form the network cabling OS. So the key overall findings for the network cabling OS are as follows. Generally, students performed well in this OS. Students were able to access the various tasks across the 3 assignments. Some students completed the tasks in greater depth than others, and there was a wide variety in the quality of evidence submitted by students, particularly the photographic evidence. Providers may find it useful to spend some time teaching students what good quality evidence looks like, i.e. how to take good quality photographs, when to take photographs to demonstrate skills and knowledge, and what screenshots would be needed to demonstrate skills in the different assignments. At times, these quality issues affected the examiner's ability to mark students' evidence. And now we'll break the areas of strength down by assignment. So overall, students performed well in assignment 1. In task 1, students were able to create a physical network design and cabling diagram based on the scenario provided. A wide range of performance was demonstrated in relation to the rationale accompanying the network design. Higher performing students were able to consider a range of data that would be transmitted across the network and what wired or wireless access and security would be required for the network. And in task 2, students who performed well in this task were able to create a functioning network using Cisco Packet Tracer. This network included all basic requirements of network design, recommended network additions and evidence to demonstrate their IP addressing structure and security measures put in place. And in assignment 2, again, overall students performed well. In task 1, the students who performed well were able to demonstrate their skills in successfully installing the different elements of the cabling system. Their evidence demonstrated the steps they took and included evidence of PPE and security protocols and controls. And in task 2, students who performed well utilised a number of different testing methods to test the data transmission capability of the cabling and tested a range of different components to ensure that data could be transmitted. Again, generally students performed well in assignment 3. In task 1, those performing well were able to identify the faults in the cables, fix and test them. Good quality images were supplied as evidence. In task 2, students who performed well were able to identify all the issues within the network and resolve them. The students included the packet tracer file showing the working network, and their test plan explained the steps taken to identify and resolve the issues. And in task 3, students performing well in this task considered a range of risks that the business faced and were able to provide a range of solutions that were relevant. Specific issues facing the business were considered rather than groups of issues, and this enabled the students to provide more specific solutions. So now we'll look at some of the areas for development for the network cabling occupational specialism. So those performing less well in task 1 tended to consider some requirements in more depth, while some requirements were omitted or only briefly considered. For future improvement, students should ensure they consider each of the requirements listed in good detail and how this affects the decisions made when proposing the network design. Those performing less well may have had areas of the network not functioning or not including additional devices they had recommended in task 1. Evidence may have been incomplete or limited and lacking application to the network. In order to perform well in this task, students should ensure that they include all components of the network they proposed in task 1 in their packet tracer file, and that all network elements are functioning correctly. For higher marks, more than one security consideration should be included, i.e. not just a password. Some students opted to use screenshots in their evidence. A supporting commentary or annotation would be helpful in demonstrating their knowledge and skills and what their evidence shows. And in assignment 2, those performing less well lacked detailed evidence and some installation steps were not included. Their focus on security protocols was limited. Students should be encouraged to provide more than the minimum requirement of evidence if it helps to support the steps they've taken. Although PPE was considered, evidence showed many not wearing PPE and not explaining why it was needed. Some of the evidence was poor quality, blurry, and lacking the detail required for examiners to be able to see what the student had achieved. Evidence gathering skills should be practiced throughout the course, and students should check the quality before submitting. Students who performed less well tended to use a limited number of testing methods and repeated these multiple times rather than utilising a range of tests. The test plans for most students were briefer than would be expected, even for the better performing students. mostly due to the limited range of tests being completed. Students should be ensuring that they use a range of different tools and that they are also referring to how their installation meets any industry standards. And moving on to assignment 3. Some providers stated that they had difficulty in sourcing the different coloured cables required for this task. An alternative would be to use electrical tape in the colours required. Students need to provide evidence for each of the 5 cables. Their test plan should explain the issue, the steps taken and the outcomes. Photographic evidence could be inserted in the plan or submitted separately. Those performing less well were able to fix some or all of the faults, but their evidence was an issue. Some did not provide evidence, while others provided poor quality images. It is recommended that students should practice collating good quality evidence. Students that performed less well were able to identify some of the issues and resolve them. However, before and after screenshots of the packet tracer file need to be evidence. Students should provide depth in their test plans, i.e. explain what the issue is, how to address it, evidence of the fix, and then how it's resolved. Students who performed less well tended to offer generic risks and solutions rather than considering specific issues. The solutions also tended to be generic rather than bespoke to the business. To perform well in this task, students should try to consider each risk on its own and how the business could address this. And now we'll look at some suggested teaching strategies to address the areas of development arising in the network cabling occupational specialist assessments. So, flipped learning opportunities. Encourage students to research aspects of the programme and then share with peers. For example, explore multiple security protocols and their applications in network design, or security best practices that go beyond basic password protections. Test plan workshops. Provide workshops on diverse testing methods. Teach students to design comprehensive test plans that reference industry standards and include various tools, ensuring they understand the importance of varied approaches to testing. Risk analysis exercises. Implement case studies or role-playing activities where students analyse specific risks in hypothetical business scenarios. Encourage them to tailor their solutions to these scenarios, demonstrating the importance of understanding the business context. Annotated screenshot practice. Instruct students on how to effectively annotate screenshots with explanations of their thought processes. Provide templates or examples that highlight effective commentary alongside visuals. And evidence gathering skills. Organise activities that focus on improving evidence gathering skills, such as note-taking practices and using various documentation formats, for example photos, videos and written summaries. So, having looked at each of the occupational specialisms for the digital support T-level, now we will consider some teaching and learning strategies that may help to improve students' outcomes and could apply across all T-level delivery. Offer one-to-one or small coaching sessions for students who would benefit from additional input in specific elements of the course. Encourage peer support. For example, perhaps Year 2 students could support Year 1 with study skills or could present bite-sized parts of the programme to their peers. Use exemplar submissions or sample student responses for discussion and analysis. Students can compare these against the mark schemes to develop a deeper insight into the Chief Examiner expectations. Peer review sessions. Incorporate peer review sessions where students can provide feedback on each other's work. This not only fosters collaborative learning and critical thinking, but also allows them to learn from their peers' strengths and areas for development. Encourage students to reflect on their placement and industry experiences and use these reflections in relation to learning in the classroom. Break down assignments into smaller, manageable tasks with specific deadlines to prevent students from feeling overwhelmed. This also allows for ongoing feedback and continuous improvement. and use case studies and real-world examples from industry to demonstrate application of course concepts, enhancing student engagement and understanding. Now that we've explored some strategies and ideas you can try in your classroom, I'd like to remind you of the support we offer during your T-level delivery. There are many more recorded sessions on our YouTube playlist, which is accessible following the link or by searching for NCFE on YouTube. From this video today, you can navigate back to our digital support specific recordings. You'll find videos here that will help you prepare for digital assessments. Please do spend some time finding what's appropriate for you and your team. You can also find support materials via our qualifications page. If you're new to T-levels, please do visit this page. Here you'll find lots of resources to support your delivery. Via this page, you can book to join us on our live events and see what support we're offering moving forward. The page is divided into months, so you can easily see what's available and plan it into your diary. We also offer one-to-one support. If you haven't already, please do book a call with me so that we can work together as you either begin or continue your T-level delivery. These calls are designed to be bespoke for your provider and a chance to get support and for us to answer your questions. You'll see the link to book a call is on the bottom of this slide. If you have any individual T-level queries in the meantime, you can also email our dedicated T-level team via the address on screen. Lastly, we'd really appreciate it if you could use the QR code on screen to share your valuable feedback. Your comments really do help us reflect on our sessions and offer targeted and relevant support, which in turn allows you to get the best outcomes for your students. Thank you for taking the time to join me. I hope you found this recording useful and look forward to seeing you at our live events over the coming academic year.